report on, yep. I have now just started the recording, so this will be available for people to watch online. I thought we would start off this morning, and I'll keep on letting people in as we go along. We'd start with each of our legislators giving a short recap of what they understand is happening and what they're seeing. And obviously, in the last, since last Thursday, we've had two big changes to the Safe Start plan. That being on Thursday, the modifications to the different phases and for restaurant owners and others, and event planners, fitness centers, etc. And then just yesterday, the announcement from the governor that no counties can move to a new phase. And I've already heard a lot from Jefferson County folks that it, they've gone 13 or maybe today is 14 days without a case. And so not being able to move to phase 3 is a real demoralizing blow, I would say, to a lot of those business owners who are waiting to get to phase 3. So thank you so much for joining us, Representative Theringer and Chapman and Senator Vandeweghe. And if one of you would like to start us off and kind of tell us what you see as the state of the state, I'd really appreciate it. I'll let you all choose who's first.
Hey, Mike, you want to go ahead first?
I can
go ahead, Steve.
I can maybe go first, just to respond to Dale Dunning's letter, which he sent to Kevin and Mike and I last week. He had a couple of really good issues. One was around, suspending or adjusting the experience rating calculation for ESD because of the virus being the issue and not anything really that any of the businesses did. I contacted Drew Shirk is our legislative liaison within the governor's office. So I sent him an email. I sent actually Dale's letter to him, to the governor's office. And his response to that piece was that ESD, that's on ESD's screen, and I think there's been some exchange about, we did put 25 million when we did the COVID legislation before he left town. We're obviously that's not going to be enough, but I think that piece is probably the easiest one, and you'll see adjustments so that you guys won't have to absorb that cost. I mean, I think there's a long-term challenge, to maintain or rebuild that fund because it's been hit, on an unprecedented level. But I don't think it's going to be in the near term that it'll be. My hope is, I think Kevin and Mike would agree that we'll, adjust that so that you're not penalized by that, that increased rate. The other one is the tax credit. And Drew, who used to work with, was in the Department of Revenue before he came over to the governor's office. He said, they're looking at that, but he said the challenge is, as in Dale's letter, he said affected businesses, and it's really a challenge to define that, for DOR to define that. So Drew, and I think the governor's office was less clear or supportive of what that might look like. It's not off the table, but I think that piece is pretty challenging to deal with the the tax rates and to diminish the tax rates. So that I just wanted to, Dale, I don't think I got back to you on what the governor's office had gotten back to me about, but I guess we're in conversation about that.
Okay.
So I don't know, Kevin or Mike, if you have something.
I'll just, I'll just piggyback on what I'm seeing from the business community as I meet with business community leaders around the state. The Association of Washington Business, which is, one of the more conservative business groups around the state. So what they're all talking about is public health, wearing a mask, social distancing. And if we don't get a hold of it, if we don't convince the public, and I think generally 2/3 to 70% of the public agrees, but I think the business community is really worried that if we don't convince the public of the seriousness of this virus, that they're going to kind of continue to be in this vortex of reopening, slowing down, reopening, slowing down. And Yakima County really has proven, if you look at what happened in Yakima County, where they were virtually back on, they had it was a real hot spot. They convinced everybody to wear a mask. They went to 95% wearing masks, and they've completely bent the curve down. And I think as I meet with business lobbyists and business representatives, and you look on social media, the business community, even big businesses, Starbucks has stepped up. You have to wear a mask to go into their store. And I listened to an interview this morning with their CEO, and he just talked about the importance of making sure that people know our business is a safe place. It's not just about your safety, it's about other people feeling safe. And so I think that, if we're really concerned about the rural economy, we've got to have kind of 100% buy-in on public health and wearing a mask and social distancing and washing our hands and making sure that our businesses will have a fighting chance. If not, if you listen to some of the professionals, they're really worried that by the end of the year, there's going to be a wave of bankruptcies and closures, permanent closures from the business community. I think federally they're trying to figure out a way to move forward with some more assistance. But I think at the end of the day, it's about masks, it's about social distancing, it's about being safe, and it's about respecting people and we live in an area. We represent the oldest median age legislative district in the state. We have a lot of retired folks, and I think people are genuinely concerned about their health. And so that's what I'm hearing, that's what I'm hearing from the business community on a statewide basis. I think that, as far as how governing the state and the governor's decisions and all that, right now, the legislature has just been kind of, we have not been called into session. We're not able to impact what the governor's decisions are. And he's making the decisions that he's making based on the evidence. But I also am confident he's probably hearing from the business community at large. Groups like AWB, the National Federation of Independent Business, other business groups, the Retail Association. They're weighing in and saying, let's convince people to wear a mask. So that's kind of how I see things from the state of the economy. If we can get a hold of public health and safe distancing, we can maybe keep our economy open. And that's what I think we all want. We all want a growing, thriving economy around our state. So I don't know, Kevin, if you have anything else.
I don't have much more to add, other than thank you, Colleen, for putting this together. I'm anxious to hear from business leaders. I would agree with both what Mike and Steve had to say. Per that letter, and if business owners are worried, I think experience rating on L&I probably is, or unemployment is something we will be able to address. Unfortunately, we're not going to go into special session, and I think all three of us would like to. I think the re-rating is scheduled to happen January 1st. So we'll see how that delves into session, but that is something I think we'll be able to address. Doing tax credits and tax breaks obviously is going to be difficult for us. And that's why I think we should really look at taking the crisis head on and see if a sector, maybe the restaurant sector, can adopt or work to support Mike Chapman's bill on B&O tax reform. I think that will help during this crisis, and it will give long-term stabilization to an industry, if we can find an industry that wants to take that on. So I'm hopeful about that, and that's some of the stuff that maybe we can do this coming session.
Okay, thank you, Senator Van de Weg. So why don't we start with Dale, and then Art, you can go next, and we'll keep on asking some business leaders to give their perspective.
Okay, my perspective.
Well, with the governor's latest announcement, actually yesterday, he sort of clamped down on things a little bit more, extending his powers. But it's sort of been a kick in the groin for all of us because, you know, we've had these goal lines and they've moved over time and they keep moving and they keep moving and it gets disheartening. But so one of the latest things that he's put out is that, you know, families, it's got to be the same household coming into your restaurant. It's unenforceable. Our business isn't going to ask people. It's something we could get in trouble for asking. It's an unenforceable thing. And I think it's worried a lot of businesses right now. A lot of restaurants, I'm looking at how they're trying to deal with it. And again, I think it's unenforceable. It is going to suppress our business. We just know because people are scared, they're not coming out. And we do feel we're operating in a very safe manner. If we look at the outbreaks in Colleen County, they're all from family gatherings. Probably the most unsafe place you can be is at home with family, looks like, from Colleen County. But this is tough. And if you guys can work with the ESD, I know in the letter I got from them, they are saying we haven't even got the application form. What wants to do, we'll send it to you to apply for this $25 million to relieve some of your things. I think it should be something automatic that if you can do in legislation that we don't have to worry about applying on this rate. Because I just worry about overwhelming the agency because they have enough issues as it is getting unemployment out. You know, other than that, just to know where we're operating, I'm about, based on last year's sales, and we grow every year, so that's not even counting growth, we're running at about 60% of normal. I'm about 70% of normal on food, and I'm 30% with beer and liquor. So that's a big hit. And our problem is that, you know, how long is it going to last? You know, we've got PPP and we've got money there, but, you know, you keep digging into that money, you go in the hole, eventually it runs out. And my concern, I think a lot of other restaurant concerns and other businesses, you know, how long is this going to continue? And we can't hold on forever. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, thanks, Dale. Art, is there anything you want to share? So, and Art, tell everyone about your businesses, if you would.
Sure.
And Dale of course owns Oasis in Swim.
No, I appreciate what Dale had said. Our challenge is my wife and I own Anytime Fitness in Squim. We've owned it for 5 years. So, you know, my perspective is, you know, we worked real hard for phase 2. I think we followed the guidelines. We implemented, I actually had to hire to make sure we had a COVID supervisor to make sure we're cleaning the gym every almost hour. So follow the protocol to a T, from WHO to the CDC to the state Ensley guidelines. So I don't get why we're taking a step backwards, I think is where I'm, you know, on the upset side, because I think we're going pretty tunnel vision on a macro level across the state. And so, you know, you look at Colleen County, we've had, as of Monday, we've had 3 hospitalizations since March, 0 death rate, 1% positive. And so those are pretty strong numbers, but I think even Jefferson County has a bigger argument. And so let's, I don't want to be, you know, proprietary or biased to myself, but for those in Jefferson County, how can we talk to the county commissioners? How can we talk to the doctors involved to just let the businesses that can succeed, that are following protocol, stay open so that they don't have to let great employees leave? And I don't think the attention is being at a micro level. I think it's more macro, and I think it's really going to be devastating as far as having businesses kind of hang on, like Dale said. I mean, we can only hang on for so long. My gym's in the red every month. I believe, you know, we've had over 1,000 members in February. I believe health and fitness is important. I believe that we're being safe. And I believe a lot of people come in and they were in actual tears saying, you know, because health issues are real as much as COVID's real, you know, stress is real. any other health issues, heart disease, all that. So not having a plan for a fitness center and just going to 5 people in a gym our gym's about 8,000 square feet doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And, you know, we will have to basically make some tough decisions. So anyway, point being, I followed protocol. I implemented, even hired somebody. I'm not too sure why my business and even Dale, we had to take a step back. I think Clallam County's doing a good job. And then of course, Jefferson County has even a bigger argument. So I want things to be seen more on a micro level than statewide.
Okay, thanks. I see we've got like Lena on, Judy Jones is as well, Nathan, Debbie or any other business owners, would you like to speak at this point? If so, go ahead and chime in.
I think, excuse me, I think the biggest frustration that I'm seeing from my clients is, like Dale said, the goalposts are continually moving. They're getting notifications, they're getting frustrated, and they don't know how to plan to recover. They just continue to be frustrated with the whole system. They don't like having to borrow money when they've operated their businesses successfully without doing it to move forward. They can't make any decisions on changing staff. I've seen businesses that they put their folks on furlough and now they're not calling them back because they've had to make some business decisions and lay people off. So now they're on permanent unemployment, and their prospects of finding another job in this area are slim and none. So I just don't know how the legislators are going to address this massive debt that's being accumulated for the state and for businesses. We need some direction as to how we can get back open, stay back open, and meet our clients' needs.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Anyone else want to chime in?
I'll say a few words. One thing I would like to say is I appreciate all of you for being here today, because it's nice for us to be able to connect with you. And I know that a lot of the frustration that we all have is out of your control at this point because the legislature is not in session. So I'm wondering if there has been, or I know a couple of several weeks ago, we had somebody on that encouraged business owners and citizens to send a letter to the governor's office requesting a special session. And I'm wondering if there's any information on how many letters were sent to the governor, how was that addressed or received, and is it impactful? And I know that you guys all have your hands tied, but is there something that could be that we as citizens can do to try and assist with that?
Thank you, Lena. Appreciate that. This is a kind of a side topic. If somebody else wants to speak, go ahead and you can start talking now, or in just a moment. One thing that I'm really concerned about is I've done some research looking at other states and how they're handling the coronavirus relief funds that they've received, is that our state has received $2.95 billion, and that's with the B, to help state and local governments. 786 million of that went to the larger counties and Seattle, the city of Seattle, because they had over 500,000 in population. And so 2.16 billion is remaining that the governor's office was responsible to allocate. And in some states, I sent this out to a few people as an example. Idaho has distributed all of the funds they received, 1.25 billion. They created a finance committee that was made up of legislators, made up of business owners, made up of the governor and his staff, agency heads, et cetera. And they decided how that should all be allocated, and it was very transparent. I can probably put a link on there so you can see they show it in different lenses from like areas of the state, types of communities, types of needs that were given this funding. And in contrast, in our state, of the $2.95 billion that the state received, there's still 1.3 to 1.4 billion that's still being held by the state. And now that the discussion from the Republicans in Washington, D.C. is that some of that, the change that's being talked about is this 2.95 billion that came to our state, that's part of the 150 billion that went to states and local governments, is that a state can, if they've given out 25%, they can keep, they don't have to allocate 45% of it like Treasury guidance suggested, that the state can keep that. And so the speculation from lobbyists and others is that the state is going to keep that money rather than actually deploying it to respond to the needs of community members, businesses, et cetera, across the state. And not only on a county level or on a state level, but also a county level. Some states have, as an example, Idaho, 56% of the funds that they received went to small businesses to keep them afloat. Whereas, and to create a bridge for them, to keep their employees employed. And whereas our state, it's been 20 million out of 2.95 billion. And so a really small percentage has gone to small businesses. 297 million of the 2.95 billion has been allocated to smaller local governments. Our county, between our 3 cities and our county, received 5 million. And even there, 350,000 of that right now is going to small businesses. So the rest of it is going to the social safety net, which obviously is important, but I mean, this is going to be a really interesting economic study, I think, at the end. Which state and which counties were the ones that were right? Should you have been providing the funds to the job producers to keep the economy going? Or do you provide it to, the really clear and dramatic needs of people that can't pay rent, can't pay their utilities, need, funds to the food bank, et cetera? And I would think that our county is one that has probably given the least, or at the very one end of an extreme, I don't know extreme, but definitely on the end of not providing very much to small businesses, and compared to other counties that received 4 million and 3 million went to small businesses, and then, we're receiving very little from the state. So, I'm really worried about it, and I worry about it as as our overall economy and the taxes that are necessary to generate our local governments being able to do what the important services that they provide. So I know you 3, the legislature hasn't had any input on that, but I'd love to hear your take on that situation. And I'm happy to put some links into the chat for as a reference.
Colleen, I'll start. And first I'll start with Lena's question. She asked about what can citizens do to advocate for a special session and the results of the letter writing that went on for the special session. I don't know, the governor's office is a separate branch, so I don't know how many letters he received As Steve mentioned, I know he's meeting with business leaders on a regular basis. I think all three of us agree that we would prefer to go into special session before our regular session starts in January. I was hoping to do it in August, just next month. I think probably the best way people can continue to advocate would be to talk to actually legislative leaders. I think there is right now a sense that it would be more a lot of trouble to go into special session. So the leaders of each of the four caucuses, Andy Billig and Mark Schessler in the Senate, and Lori Jenkins and JT Wilcox in the House, I think probably are people that you could continue to reach out to. And then, Colleen, I think one of your main questions was, is the state going to keep some of the federal money for themselves as opposed to passing it out as Idaho has done? I don't think any of us would necessarily, I certainly wouldn't advocate for that to happen if there's still money left when we get back in January. You know, one of our main two jobs is allocating money, and it's worrisome to see the way some of it's being spent without legislative approval. However, we do have a similar committee to Idaho. I know our caucus is represented by Mark Mullet on it. Maybe we're just not transparent on the websites as Idaho has been, and of course that's our fault, our undoing. It always is good to be as transparent for the public as possible. I would say that the fact that we haven't spent all the money isn't necessarily a bad idea. I know we just heard a lot of business owners saying how they can only hang on for so long, and maybe by maybe by still having some of that money in reserve, we will be able to use that to continue to help small businesses if we go in that direction or have special session.
Yeah, I would just add, you know, to the issue around the moving goalposts and the changing policy. It would be nice if the virus was predictable. It would be good if the virus, you know, was controllable, so that we, you know, I think the fact that the governor has, you know, put these tighter restrictions on, you know, last week, and then, you know, tightened them up yesterday, is all based on what's going on in the southern states, in Florida and Texas and Alabama, because they found that a lot of the, you know, the disease was spreading through bars. People getting, you know, having a few beers and getting kind of raucous, and the disease was spreading. So it's hard, I think, for policymakers to write specific policies when the disease keeps spreading. And I think that's back to Mike's point, that the business community, that really the best way to get predictability, as was evidenced in Yakima, you know, is by wearing masks and social distancing. And the more, you know, we follow those guidelines, the more the disease gets controlled, and the expansion factor, which I think is up to like 1.8 right now, and they want it below 1, right? The multiplying factor is really the best way to improve the economy. And Colleen, I guess I look at Idaho. I mean, the population of Idaho is like 1.7 million. King County's 2.5. So we've got a state of almost, you know, 3.2, 3.5 million. It's a little, with, I think probably the politics in Idaho are probably a little more homogeneous than they are in Washington. So it's just you know, there's just a lot of different factors, comparing apples to oranges, quite frankly, although I know that Mike and a lot of us would like to see us adopt Idaho's tax policies, because they have a three-legged stool that's very balanced between property tax, sales tax, and income tax. But you know, so if we want to use the Idaho example, it's just a smaller homogeneous set to compare to. And quite frankly, I think that's part of the issue about why there hasn't been a special session. The four caucuses and the governor can't agree on what the agenda is. And if you look at, there's people out there that are politicizing whether you should wear a mask or not, or politicizing whether they would use vaccines or not. That's not helpful. That does not lead to good policy. So it's just a very challenging time to deal with the virus itself and its impacts on business, particularly in my view, when issues are being politicized that shouldn't be politicized.
Hey, I wanted to jump in here. First of all, I want to say thank you for the invite. I don't think anyone knows who I am, but my name is Ian Harrington. I was hired on to be the food and beverage manager at Cedars at Dungeness for 7 Cedars. I'm not speaking on behalf of 7 Cedars as a whole, but I did want to give my input because I've got to hear a lot of great things so far this morning. My wife and I moved out from Seattle in December, and I'm native to Washington. I grew up in Covington, Washington, but I did live in Chicago, and I have lived in California. And the politicizing of the virus is something that's really kind of jarring for me as an operator here, because it's almost like I'm fighting 2 battles. So one is trying to do kind of the right thing, as Representative Chapman had talked about, in terms of masking, social distancing, getting more knowledge on the virus, because that's constantly changing all the time, and then trying to do the best that I can as an operator to follow those guidelines. And at the same time, my clientele can be resistant to that or be resistant to information. And that's proven to be a challenge. So even when I do try to implement some standards to help my business, I lose guests, or I'll have guests that are kind of confronting that or not wanting it, or I might have competition that wouldn't be following the same protocols or same mandates. And with the newest one that we haven't brought this up yet, but the newest one where you have to have people from the same household dine in, it's impossible. Okay, so looking at it, when I first talked to ownership about it, it's impossible because it puts everything on me as the owner to basically change the word hospitality to hostile, and that's where, in looking at what I was wanting more from leadership, is the truth is that dine-in should be gone at this moment. I mean, if we could do it, Dr. Anthony Fauci has already publicly said he would never eat in a restaurant or never fly on a plane until this pandemic is over. And so what I think the governor's trying to do is he's trying his best to keep our businesses open, because the reality is that dine-in probably shouldn't be happening right now. Even when we're doing the best that we can, and even if I tried to really give it my best shot in terms of sanitizing everything, making sure people are distanced, I become almost like a bouncer in my own restaurant, to where I have to be, excuse me, can you please back up 6 feet? Excuse me, can you put your mask on when you step up from the table? And it starts to eliminate the whole reason that you or me or anyone go out to eat, which is to kind of escape, your normal reality and have a nice, relaxing time, have a dinner, have an experience. And that's kind of gone. I'm hoping that we can work as a community, or at least what I'm trying to do here with 7 Cedars, is start to embrace new trends and new technology to try to kind of almost ride this thing through the fall, because I don't anticipate it getting any better. And there's some things here that I'm noticing in swim and in PA that we can jump on more, in terms of whether it's online ordering, whether it's online menus, online reservations, outdoor dining. There's other things here that we can start to kind of start implementing in the community and maybe getting that out more, which is a little bit harder due to our age demographic here. But I'm going to try to start going in that direction. And I've posted some signage, and I try to do my best to talk to guests to not make it a political conversation, but just to say, here's what we're doing to help keep you and your loved ones safe. We hope that you respect that, and we respect you as well, and go that route. But I'm not going to argue that it's been very difficult, and in order to be profitable, it's almost like we have to completely change our business model. So like we have catering and we do events, those are gone. And so I'm looking at maybe doing like delivered catered 4-course dinners, or trying to change some things up with really no end in sight, like we've talked about in the past. I guess I'm kind of rambling, but I just wanted to kind of jump on what had been said before, that I do think that the focus should be on fighting the virus and the things that we can do as businesses to do that, and then look for help from our state government for financial compensation for businesses that, like for the instance of the gyms, where that's like almost impossible. Like you either have to say, I want to have this open, but if we do follow the rules that are being mandated, then it is impossible. So what kind of help can he get, or what businesses can get help for that? That's about all I got.
I see that Judy has her hand up. And before she speaks, I just wanted to emphasize that it's not just restaurants. I mean, wineries and taverns, I mean, they're completely shut down indoors anyway, and they're being incredibly harmed or impacted. And then also event planners. I mean, we've had a really strong economy around events, and that has been an element of restaurants providing catering services as well, but with receptions being totally closed down. I think that that if there's going to be some kind of legislation that helps out certain industry sectors, supporting those as well is really critical. I mean, taking a very tough, very in-depth look at what business sectors are being really impacted. There's some small ones here and there that, you know, are just completely shut down. And I think collectively, it frustrates me to feel like we're in this wait mode. I would rather see something more proactive where the community is seeing that there's a lot of thoughtful action, and I'm sure there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. But if our community leaders can, you know, have some platforms similar to this, that would be, you know, really helpful. And we of course are happy to host, but you know, having city managers, county commissioners, our legislators be talking about where we are and what some potential solutions are. And so we can know that there's some legislation coming down the pike. I think that will generate some hope for a lot of business owners that feel really isolated and desperate at this point. I'm certainly hearing that. I get that, probably on an hourly basis. And I just wanted to share that. So Judy, you had your hand up. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, you know, last week you and I were talking about the unemployment benefits, and how the benefit rating will harm businesses starting in January with their new unemployment rate. You know, I don't think very many people are aware of that legislation that allotted $25 million to a special fund to wipe out some of these benefits for companies that apply. The application deadline is September 30th. I think the application deadline should be like March 31st of next year, after people actually get these notices telling them what their new rate is going to be. And also, if we have money hanging around, this $1.2 billion left of federal government money, maybe we can move that over to that fund as well.
Okay, thanks. Good thoughts, Judy. Appreciate it. Kevin or Mike or Steve, do you want to respond to anything that's been shared thus far?
Well, I'd like to comment on Art Green's comments about looking at a regional approach. And I think that's something we can take a look at. I don't think it's going to happen, you know, this week or next week. It really, again, you know, how the cases go in Clallam will help. I mean, Jefferson, you know, they haven't had a case, I guess, in 2 weeks. And Mike and I were on the phone with Jefferson Healthcare yesterday, and you know, they're all set as far as PPE and being able to handle the virus if there's an uptick. So I think that's you know, that's good news. And I think Clallam is not far behind. I think Dr. Uthink or Unthink and Dr. Locke in Jefferson County have done a good job. And I think Art's point about how we might be able to address this regionally makes some sense. And I think, you know, I think Kevin and Mike and make note of that. And as the cases go down, my understanding in Clallam, a lot of the cases that they're dealing with happen from the 4th of July weekend and the family gatherings and stuff like that. And the point about it was either Dale or Art that said, well, families where the contagion is, right? So and I totally agree. There's no way a hospitality industry should be asked to, nor can legitimately try to regulate whether a group comes in and whether they're all family members. I mean, that's, I think that's a guidance. It seems to me it's unenforceable. But again, looking at that regional approach, I think makes some sense. I think Mike and Kevin and I will, as we look at the caseload, the data, we'll try to make the case for a more regional approach, because obviously this is a classic of where one size does not fit all with these guidances. And I don't know what Mike and Kevin think about that, but
I agree. I'll quickly address Judy's questions. Again, you're right. The legislature starts in January, and the new experience ratings are expected to come out in January as well. I hope that we'll be able to work something out with the department as we negotiate with them out of session. We have a very strong ESD program in the state. If I was a business owner, I would not be too worried about that right now, about the new experience rating. I think we'll look at this and approach it long term. Of course, unemployment insurance is almost all the time 50% federally funded. If the unlikely event that our state system runs out of ESD unemployment money, ESD money, 12 states already have, we wouldn't until probably the end of the year. We can get essentially zero interest federal loans for that. And as I mentioned, at least 12 states are already having to do that. As far as moving the federal stimulus money into ESD, I think would be probably something we don't want to do. We probably want to just, we have a very good program, just slowly rebuild up that fund as it has, use that federal money for other, that federal money can be far more impactful just to small businesses in other ways besides putting it in the ESD so they don't have an experience rating increase. There's a lot more, many better ways we can use that than doing that. Again, we have a good ESD program in the state. It will slowly recover. It will just take time. I think during the session, I'll be interested in making some tweaks to our unemployment, mainly around sole proprietors making it easier for sole proprietors or one-person businesses to enter into, to choose to start paying unemployment and L&I during their careers. Right now, they just have one window when they're first incorporating, and I think we need to make that easier for people to choose to go into later on. So I think I'm sure we'll be doing tweaks like that, but we have a good system now. Thanks for your questions, though, Judy.
I'd like to add, and I should have said this before, that I think one of the most important things that the business community can do and should do is emphasizing the importance of wearing masks in public, and that collectively this isn't a political issue. I'm surprised to hear Ian's comments. I certainly haven't heard that elsewhere, and curious to know, Dale, if you have, or if there's been other pushback in other public places. But celebrating this as a clear tool to use to prevent the spread of the virus is something that we all should be supporting, because it's something we can do to keep the cases low so that we can get to the next phase, so we can start to recover our economy. I mean, we have so little control in so many aspects, but getting our young kids to not party with their friends and not wear masks, and then spread the virus that way, and then also making sure everybody's wearing a mask in public as a regular routine, I think is important. And EDC is putting out a public service announcement mid-August. It's kind of a love letter to our businesses, thanking them for all the work they've done and sticking through it, and everybody's wearing a mask, and it'll highlight 17 businesses. We're doing that with Silas Cruz. So that'll be coming out, but I think a positive attitude about wearing masks is something we all should be doing together, and I'm happy to work with our legislators and our local leaders to promote that and make that a positive thing for our community. So I noted that Debbie had asked that Nathan speak about the closures of departments in the city and how that's curtailing construction starts. Nathan, can you speak to that for a moment?
Thanks, Colleen, and thanks, Debbie, for the question. So I think I can tie it into the bigger conversation as well. And I know Colleen made some really good points earlier about how critical it is that we see some of that relief funding continue to flow from the state, because I think locally we have a really good opportunity to put it to use on the ground and provide direct support to businesses and residents immediately when we receive it. And ultimately we've demonstrated we can do that effectively, and we'll continue to do that effectively. I do think Debbie's question is a really good one, and actually I do want to emphasize that there is no department at the city right now that is closed. Everybody is open, but your format in working with our employees is different. So it is an online, and for most departments, it's a very innovative approach in that for construction inspections, we're doing virtual inspections. For applications, we're doing those digitally. Ultimately, it seems to be working well. And in fact, I would say the two things that are really making a difference for city revenues at this time are construction sales tax coming in, because those projects continue to move forward. We're continuing to provide support to those projects, as well as I think it's really to the credit of the legislature that we actually have the construction going on, because most of those capital projects we have in our community saw capital contributions from the legislators that you see on the screen here today, who actually voted to help out those projects from a capital perspective. So the fact that those are moving forward, it's a huge positive benefit to keeping government running and moving forward. Another thing that has really made a difference in our ability to keep things going and keep up with the needs of our local citizens is the fact that the legislature actually took action to ensure that we're seeing sales tax come in from online businesses as well. And so those online purchases, the dollars and the increases that we've seen there, that makes a difference. It makes a difference that so that we can serve all of you better, serve our businesses and residents well during this really difficult time. I do think it's really important, though, that as the city is challenged getting through from a revenue perspective, I think it's really important that we all remember how critical it is that the impacts we see are really minor compared to what the residents and businesses are seeing specifically. Ultimately, we are basically seeing a ripple effect. And if we can turn around and support our businesses and residents, we're going to see those benefits as well. So I really think it's important we all remember it starts at the very ground level of keeping our businesses going, keeping them alive, and making sure that they're running safely in this time.
Thank you, Nathan. So we've got about 10 minutes left. Is there somebody else that would like to pose a question? Or I see Jennifer, you're on. Jennifer Burkhart from Olympic Medical Center. She's also on the EDC board. And so, Jennifer, how are you seeing things from OMC's perspective?
OMC continues to do well in terms of providing PPE to the employees. I would say there are ongoing concerns about supplies, but similar to what I just heard about Jefferson Healthcare, there is plenty currently in supply, and we're building up more and more, 90 to 120 days at a minimum. And the mask wearing, we started early with universal masking, and so that has been something that we've enforced for quite some time at this point. But it does continue to be an issue with visitors and with those who want to visit patients, particularly in the ICU. So it's tough to enforce. I mean, I hear what some of the business owners are talking about, and I think that as the local community hospital, we're really struggling with that as well, but trying to do the right thing in terms of keeping the enforcement strong and making sure that our patients, our staff, and our community are as healthy and protected as possible.
Thank you, Jennifer. Mike, Steve, or Kevin, is there anything you'd want to expand on at this point?
I guess I'll just, not everybody was on the call 2 weeks ago, I think, when I kind of talked about business taxation and how we tax our businesses. So maybe I'll just touch on that. It continues to be work that I'm working on and passionate about, and working with a couple of trade groups, the auto dealers, and hopefully the restaurant association. So everyone knows if you're in small business, you're taxed on your gross. So if you're a restaurant, most restaurants in a normal year probably don't make much of a profit the first half of the year, certainly in the first quarter, but they'll pay a quarterly B&O. Auto dealers in Washington will pay more. If they do the same $10 million of sales, they pay more in taxation in Washington than they do in California or Idaho. California and Idaho, if you haven't noticed, are two very divergent states, and yet auto dealers will pay much less in taxation. And the reason is that Washington taxes on their gross revenue. So if they sell a $60,000 truck and net $1,500, they pay taxation on the entire $60,000, where in California and Idaho, they're allowed to deduct their costs. And if you talk to auto dealers, they have a lot of costs. So what we're trying to do, and there's a coalition of legislators that are trying to figure out a way, could we have a trade group be willing to be a pilot project, as it were, to be taxed on their net profit? Certainly during a pandemic, that probably would have alleviated the taxation on most businesses. So many small businesses had revenue during the pandemic. Most probably didn't turn a net profit. And yet the indignity of it all is they still had to turn around and pay B&O while they were trying to figure out how to keep their doors open. So I think that in these difficult times for businesses, and certainly they are very difficult, that maybe we can come together and figure out a way so that we can make the taxation of our small businesses more fair, more equitable, and not have to write a check to the state while you're not really making any money. And I think finally, the phrase an income tax will be used for political purposes, but I make this argument, I've yet to have anybody come back and say you're wrong. If you're a sole proprietor and you generate $60,000, $80,000, or $100,000 as a sole proprietor, and then you pay tax on that, how can that be described as anything but an income tax on a sole proprietor? The sole proprietor does one thing, they generate revenue, and every quarter they pay tax. So for those who say we can't ever talk about equitable and fair taxation because we don't have an income tax, that's strange credulity and logic, because we do have an income tax. What we've chosen is who we tax, whose income we tax. So we don't tax Jeff Bezos' income when he sells $500 million worth of stock. I have nothing against Jeff Bezos, and I don't have anything against him selling that much stock. But I don't think it's fair, never have, never will, that he doesn't pay anything to the state when he does that. But if you're a small contractor building fences in Clallam County, or you're a small plumber generating $100,000 in income, you're paying tax. So that's what we're trying to do. What is fair? And why is it fair that an auto dealer in Washington pays more in tax than someone in Idaho or California for the same, for the same sales? It's a long journey. There's a lot of work to do, but I think at the end of the day, it would be fair if our small businesses got a break, got to deduct some of their costs, and we didn't just tax them. We just tax them. They just generate income and we tax them. End of story. No deductions. And I think that's at the crux of why our small business community in districts like the 24 struggle. I think that's at the crux of why our rural economy struggles. Who do we tax in our rural economy? Small business, sales tax, property tax. What do we have in the 24th? We have a lot of small business. We have a lot of people that own property, and we have a lot of people that have to shop at stores to take care of their family. So for 20 years, people have complained about how our rural economy hasn't recovered. And for 20 years, we've had that tax system. So I'm about trying to figure out, is there a better way that would actually let our rural economy grow and prosper and breathe a little bit? Because we can sit here and argue, and in 20 years, our rural economy will probably be sitting exactly where it is because of our taxation structure. Now, that's my opinion. There were probably hundreds, if not thousands of people across the district that will vehemently disagree, that will just say, just cut taxes more and more and more. My final point on that is the federal government cut taxes. And we still saw the rural economy over the last 4 years fall further and further behind from the urban economy, not just in Washington, but across this nation after the largest federal tax break. So we can continue, what's the saying? If you continue to do the same thing with the same results, we can do it another 20 years. We can argue, fuss, fight, and keep taxing small business, property, and sales. My guess is we'll continue to run anywhere from 8 to 11% unemployment. I think there's a better way. It's what I'm about, and it's what I'm working hard on. And I know politically, not a smart thing to do, but it's the right thing to do because I think it's the only way out for our rural economy in the long run. A different taxation, a different way that we generate revenue for the state. We are inordinately balancing the state's budget on the backs of our rural economy, in my opinion. Again, I have nothing against Mr. Bezos. God bless him. He's the richest guy in the world. But I would like to see him contribute a little bit personally to the state of Washington for schools, roads, infrastructure, and give a little bit of a break to our small business owners. All right, enough said.
So I have a question about the new HEALS Act bill that Senator McConnell at the federal level has proposed. And it includes a provision for, instead of the $600 per week, $200 per week, if I recall correctly, and until a state can pay, the ESD could pay out 70% of a person's typical wage that they had previously. Do you all have any information if ESD could modify their system quickly to switch to the 70%? Because I'm sure the $200 per week is well below a lot of people's earlier wage of 70% equivalent.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, real quick, no, ESD could not make a change, and it'd be a couple of months most likely before people would start getting the new money into the new program. And I think that's been one of the counter arguments to the federal government from states. The latest news would appear that maybe the president and the Congress will just extend the 600 while they continue to work on a broader, more robust plan. The 600 has run out. People are not eligible for it this week, so time is ticking. But I do not believe, I think it has been proven that ESD has no capacity to make changes quickly. And that was part of the problem initially, was the federal plan came in, our ESD was swamped. It was a system set up for 5 to 8% unemployment, and we went to 20% unemployment overnight. Lots of criticism, all valid, but at the end of the day, not many organizations who are set up to handle 5 to 8% that go to 20% literally overnight. Definitely things were not prepared. And so to make another change looks like it could be a month to 2 before money would flow again. And I think the federal government has gotten that message loud and clear. The president just said this morning, he was indicated that he would just, that he's willing to extend the 600 a week until the federal government can figure out their plan. So anyway.
Thank you, Representative Chapman. So would anybody else like to share anything? It is 9 o'clock, and I want to be very, want to honor everyone's time. So are there any parting comments that Senator Vandeweghe or Representative Chapman or Theringer would like to make? Otherwise, yeah, do you have anything? Ending remarks?
Well, just thanks for doing this. You know, I think we've been doing this about once a month or so, and it's certainly helpful for me and for us to hear what you guys, what's going on the ground. I wish we had more clear-cut answers to solve the problem, but you know, I think if you look around the state, you know, we're doing better up here in the North Peninsula than a lot of places as far as managing the virus. Obviously, there's a lot of pain with the smaller businesses, but I think we'll get through it. And you know, let's continue the dialogue and don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And like Dale's letter and other things, we can try to move that through and try to get answers for that. But working together to counteract the virus and working together to rebuild the economy is, I think, what we're all about. So thanks for this conversation.
I think, Colleen, your tagline is we'll get through this together.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad message to finish. We will get through this together. Lots of challenges, both on the health and the business side. And don't forget the health challenges are real, they're vital. And, you know, thank God we have some of the best local local health officials that healthcare funding is going to be a challenge going forward. To maintain our hospitals in both Clallam, Jefferson, and Grays Harbor. That's been a challenge. We'll have to continue to fight to maintain Medicaid reimbursement rates, all of that. So it's both a health crisis and an economic crisis. The last thing is that we're all doing our best and everybody needs to pull together, but wear a mask, social distance, and wash your hands.
Yeah.
That alone is probably the best thing we all can do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy. It doesn't cost anything. If you need a free mask, they're available. We should all be doing that. Okay. Well, if no one else has anything, really appreciate you joining us. I know your time is very valuable and you're very busy. So thank you for joining us today. And we'll work on programs together in the future. I'm looking forward to having our community be a part of potential solutions moving forward. So thank you, and we'll get through this together. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you.